Okay, hey everyone. We are going to start from the top of the SSH key generation process in this video, which means we're going to delete the keys we might have already made and follow along the GitHub instructions for generate a new SSH key, and then for testing that SSH key together, so that if you have any doubts about whether or not you were doing the right thing yesterday in class, that this will hopefully resolve some of that. So again, I'm following in this generate a new SSH key instructions. They're going to be on my other screen, so you won't see them. You'll only see my terminal. But I would encourage you to Google and open up these instructions so you can make sure you're copying and pasting without any issues. All right, so we're in our studio. It automatically opens up to the R console, but we want to toggle over to the terminal. Forgive my terminal for having a lot of experimentation on it. And we are going to first remind ourselves what sort of files we're working with, which is by looking at our .ssh files. And because this SSH is sometimes a little bit finicky, we're going to always make sure that we're getting to the SSH folder from our home directory, which we'll talk about more later. But for now, that just means that you need to start with a tilde, a / and then look for the .ssh folder. So this line of code, ls space tilde /.ssh. And what you'll likely see are these three folders within your SSH folder, or files within your SSH folder. You may or may not have these known hosts. If you do have these known host files, then I would actually encourage you to just follow kind of option 1 in the email, which is to look through the testing the SSH, because that means that you're pretty close. But what we're going to do is we're just going to delete them all and start from the beginning so that we are definitely on the same page. So to remove things, we use this rm function space, and then we have to go through one by one and tell our terminal which ones we want to delete bit by bit. So we use this same file path into the SSH folder, and then we can type the names of each file that we want to delete. So I want to remove the config file. I want to remove the ID files. I want to remove the public ID files. And in my case, I'm also going to be removing this known hosts and known hosts old files. Okay, so now if we do that ls root directory .ssh look, we have nothing in there. So that means we can start from the very beginning of this GitHub tutorial. And the first of those steps is to open up our terminal and paste in this key generation code. So again, I pasted this from the GitHub tutorial, but we do need to enter in the email address that we use for our GitHub account. So yours should look almost exactly like this, but put your email in the quotation marks, press enter, and you're told that the terminal generated this key, and it asks, where do you want to save this key? You're just going to go ahead and press enter because we are generally happy with the default position, which is in this root SSH folder. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about passphrases. Do you want one? Do you not? I would, at this point, encourage not, because we know how to configure the file for not. And so that means just press enter twice. Note that if you start touching your keyboard, even if you don't see anything show up, the terminal is recording your keystrokes, and so you will be inadvertently setting yourself a password. So just press enter, enter again, and you have bypassed the passphrase and generated a random public key. So that kind of gets us through the first half of this generation process. The next step is adding the SSH key to the SSH agent. So again, copying and pasting from GitHub here. The next step is this evaluation of the SSH agent. So you can go ahead and paste the code that I have here in the terminal, press enter, and we all get to generate this sort of agent ID that will look different for everyone, and that's fine. And now this next step is specific to Mac users who have Sierra 10.12.2 or higher. This is not a step that happens in Windows. So, follow the directions for your computer type and, do this if only necessary. But we need to generate a configuration file for kind of newer Macs. And what this means is that we need to create this file because it doesn't yet exist for us. And we create it using the touch function. So we use touch ~.ssh/config. And so now that file has been created, and then we are going to open it. So I don't know why I went from typing to not copy and pasting, but now I'm going to copy and paste that open function that is going to open our configuration text file. And in the GitHub instructions, it has a series of texts that you can go ahead and paste into it. But one of the notes that's important to look at is that if you do not have a passphrase, which is why I encouraged us not to use it, we actually want to delete this third line, that is the use keychain yes line. We can then go ahead and close out. It is going to automatically save, and we're going to leave that as it is. So now we have our configuration files, we have generated our keys. We now need to add it to the agent, which is step 3 of this add agent instructions in GitHub, where we're going to do SSH-add space. And importantly here, there's a note beneath this step that if you were just copying and pasting, there is a $K in the code, but the note says to remove the $K if we're not using a passphrase. So because we're not using a passphrase, we don't use this $K. We're just going to instead jump right into our file path of the tilde, SSH, etc. And we're going to put in the ID ED25519. All right. Then we're going to press enter. Everything looks good so far. We have our email associated with an ID. And this is where I think everyone did, many of us at least, got yesterday. And the instructions on GitHub then take you to adding this to your GitHub account. And so we can jump to that set of instructions to adding it to your account, which is also something we did yesterday, which is taking one more line of code and copying our passphrase. So the passphrase that's stored in this pub folder, this pb copy function is going to copy it, pretty much put it on your clipboard and save it for later. So we're going to run that. It's now stored on our clipboard. And then we are going to navigate to our repositories. So go ahead and get to your GitHub profile. Actually, not to our repositories, just to our settings. So settings are in the upper right-hand corner. You can click on your icon and drop down to settings. Find the SSH keys tab on the left. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete my key because we're starting from scratch. I want to rewrite it. I'm going to add then the new SSH key button. And then I'm going to add, make it somehow identifiable, but the important thing is that it's the key for this computer, so the ID should have something to do with the computer that you're on. We are going to leave this authentication type, and then if you ran that pb copy line of code correctly, if you paste, then what appears is your key, which should start with this SSH-ED25519 and end with your email address. Then we're going to add the SSH key. You may have to, sign back in, for instance, but you should have generated a key. So this is where we all thought that we would be successful as of yesterday, but we did not try one more step that us instructors kind of think was pretty important, and that is to go through this test your SSH connection step. And so what this step is, so you can hop over here if you're following along on GitHub, is to just put virtually one more line of code into your terminal. So we're going to jump back to terminal and insert this line of code, which is to kind of authenticate GitHub with our SSH key. So it's this SSH space --T space git at github.com. Press enter. And this is asking us, or it's actually giving us kind of the error that GitHub anticipates, which is to say that this authenticity can't be established. It gives us kind of this unique fingerprint, and it says that this key is not known by other names. And do we actually want to continue connecting? Now, our options are not exactly what the GitHub website shows us. On the GitHub website, it says, do you want to continue just yes or no? I'm still a little mystified by what this fingerprint option is. But when we go ahead and click yes, we get a notice that we've permanently added GitHub to our list of known hosts, and I get this really successful notice, which is, hi, you've successfully been authenticated. And this is the message that we want to be seeing. If you do not see this message, this is the moment to come to us for office hours. If you do see this message, then you can go ahead and follow the instructions on the remainder of the email, and we can all get set up for next week. And just sort of a fun check is that what we think was really missing was this known hosts file, which is generated by this last line of code. So now if we look at our SSH options through using this ls function, we now have actually these 2 files of known hosts, which why 2, unsure, but as long as you have at least one of them, then you should be ready to clone without any problems. Hopefully that works. Reach out if you're having any issues.